format of this meeting is a 10-minute speaker, a 10-minute coffee break, and then a main speaker. Tonight, our first speaker is Mike. Please welcome Mike.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Bennett. I'm an alcoholic. I'm happy to be here. That was not always the case for me. I got sober January 26, 1992. So to save you the math, I just celebrated 28 years sobriety. It's okay to clap for that. I think so. Some of you it may not impress, but it impresses the shit out of me. I wasn't a guy that could stay sober. And I know there's a lot of younger people here and in AA now. And you're probably sick of people talking about younger people in AA and glad you're all getting sober so young. But I was only 26 years old when I got sober, so I've been hearing that shit for 28 years. So, and as you start getting chips and birthdays, congratulations to everybody. I always had issue with that because I was 4 months sober before I ever came to my first AA meeting. And then after I went to some meetings, I started seeing all those chips. And I went to my sponsor and said, Mickey, do you think I should get those chips? Because I was sober. He said, no, I think in your case, let's just wait till you're a year. We don't want to waste the group's money. So I don't like chips. No, I don't give a shit about them. But I never got any of them. I was sharing with my friends over here that I always carry my chip in my pocket, my years of sobriety, but I also carry a 24-hour chip in my pocket too, because my rotten old sponsor, when I was about 2 years sober, gave me this chip. And he said, no matter how many years you get, don't forget that it's still just one day at a time. And I think that is so important to remember. So congratulations on your chips, and try to live your life as we have, one day at a time, and remember what's important. So I'm happy to be here, but I was not always that way. When I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I came here because I could not come up with a better solution. And I tried, I promise you. I tried changing the way I drank, and I tried changing where I lived and where I worked, and I changed everything in my life that I could change, and the one thing I couldn't change was me. And I finally got so sick of living with me that I got desperate enough to come to AA, and I didn't even think I was an alcoholic. I knew I had a drinking problem. Nice of you guys to show up late. You want me to start over? A lot of people in my life had told me that I was an alcoholic, and if I'd stop drinking, my life would get better. And I tried that a couple of times, and I realized they were wrong. When I quit drinking, my life doesn't get better. Here's what it looks like without AA. The first few days, I start keeping food down. I start sleeping a little bit. I start getting some rest, and my brain starts to defog just a little bit, so it seems like I'm getting better. But after a little bit of time goes by, a week or two, I start getting a little irritable, a little bit discontent. That turns eventually, after a period of time, into anger. And before long, it is rage. And that's the way I live my life, in complete rage. Sobriety was the worst experience of my life before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And people kept telling me that that was the solution. And I proved to myself they were wrong, and I still believe today they were wrong. Drinking was not my problem. Drinking was the solution to what I just described. When I felt like that sober, I could only stand it for so long before it became absolutely necessary for me to have a few drinks and shut the voices off and calm everything down, just so I could exist. I couldn't survive without it. Now, the only exception to that is I found weed. And you know, if you're baked all the time, you can stay sober for months at a time. And that was a pretty good cure for alcoholism for a while, but eventually it ran its course too. So I got sober because I had drank up my second marriage, and I had my second kid from the second wife, and I thought something has got to change in my life because I didn't want to live that way. And I finally came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I didn't go through treatment. I would have went through treatment, but I didn't have any insurance, and I damn sure wasn't going to spend my money on it, because if it didn't work, I'd need money to drink. I'm not wasting it on that shit. So I just came to AA. I looked them up in the Yellow Pages, and I found out where a meeting was, and I parked about 2 blocks away, and I snuck in. I don't know, I wasn't ashamed of being a drunk, but I was damn sure ashamed of coming into an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. It was the most embarrassing experience of my life was walking into an AA meeting. So I snuck in with the little crowd that was coming in. I just kind of fell in with them, and I just decided I would just look and see what you guys were about. I didn't really know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous. Except I had this idea it was religious because I had a cousin who would get sober in AA, and he would get religion, and you couldn't stand being around him while he was sober, but then he would start drinking again, and he would just be a regular guy, and the religion would be gone, so I could stand being around him. And then he'd get sober again, and he'd become a religious fanatic, and then he'd get drunk again, and he'd be an okay guy. And one day he'd told me to come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I said, Dan, I could never do that. He said, why not? I said, because it's religious, and I don't believe in God. He said, no, there's one whole part of AA for people who believe in God and a whole other part people who don't. Well, at my first AA meeting, I realized I was in the wrong one because everybody was talking about God. Some of them were talking about higher power, but I knew what they meant. But I didn't have the courage to ask anybody where the meeting for atheists was, so I just sat there and tried not to be noticed too much. Hey, and there's several people that I sponsor in the room, so I want to tell you right now, I normally wear a tie when I'm invited to talk, but I was invited this afternoon and came here straight from work without time to go home and change, so that does not get you off the hook for it later. Unless you're invited last minute, you don't have time to change. So, huh? Shush! You were too late to have an opinion. We discussed that before you got here. Anyways. So I sat in this first AA meeting, and I thought this was the strangest experience of my entire life. It didn't really seem to have anything to do with what was going on in my life. And I read these steps on the wall because they were in the club up in Washington State where I got sober. I moved up there from here because I was dodging alimony, and I got sober up there. And I'm in this clubhouse, and I'm reading these steps, and I'm thinking, none of that stuff applies to my life. The first part of the first step made some sense. Admitted we were powerless over alcohol. I identified with that immediately. Although I did not think I was an alcoholic, I didn't understand alcoholism, I understood that once I started drinking, you better tie me to a chair because I'm going to keep drinking until there ain't nothing left to drink. I promise you that. So I didn't have any problem identifying with that. The rest of the steps, they mentioned God and higher powers and a bunch of crap that had nothing to do. Where is the step for getting your ex-wife off your ass? That's the step I needed. Where's the step to get the bill collectors to quit calling? Because I really needed that step. There were steps I needed. There are steps about making amends to other people, but what about the people who offended me? Where's the step for them? Because that was the problem, the way people had treated me. I thought that I drank because of the way the world treated me. That's what I really thought. I was a victim of bad breaks and misunderstandings my whole life. So I left after that first meeting thinking I didn't really identify with anybody. I didn't really feel like I fit in here. But the guy that was sitting with me got me a cup of coffee while I was here. And nobody had been nice to me in a long time. So he said, come back tomorrow night and I'll be here and I'll meet you. And I thought, well, I hadn't been invited back anywhere in a long time too. So I came back the next night and it was the same thing. It was just some bunch of goody two-shoes who seemed to, have good lives and accidentally drink too much and decided they, could team up with some other goody two-shoes and their lives would get better, but it didn't really apply to me. And the third meeting I came to might have been my last meeting, but an old guy like me at the time said, as it went around the meeting, it was a participation meeting, as it went around the room, it got to him, and he said, if your problem's drinking, stop drinking, and your life will get better. But if when you stop drinking, your life gets worse, maybe we can help you. And that was the first time in my life that I met somebody or heard somebody and I thought maybe they know how I feel. Now, it wasn't profound enough for me to run up to him and ask him to be my sponsor and do all the shit we're told to do here. When the meeting was over, you guys started to hold hands and do your prayer, and I escaped because I was sitting by the door and I went to my car. But he met me at my car before I could get out, and he said, or he asked me, do you have a sponsor? And I said, no. And he said, good, I'm going to be your sponsor until you can find one that suits you better. And that was fine with me because I didn't want to ask anybody anyways. How many of you guys are anxious about asking somebody to sponsor you and risking rejection? And, I didn't want to do any of that shit. I just wanted to kind of hang out and hope I could figure out what this thing was about on my own. And so he volunteered, and I was glad because he was the first man in my adulthood that I grew to love. And he stayed my sponsor until I was 12 years sober and would still be today, except he died. He had some aneurysm or something and died. So I had to get a different sponsor, and I've kept a sponsor all these years. But anyway, so he started helping me. He said to me that first night, he said, do you believe in God? And I said, no, and if I have to for this to work, it's not going to work for me. And he said, are you willing to believe in God if I can prove it to you? And I said, well, sure, but you're not going to. And he got all excited about that. He thought this willingness I had was just wonderful. And I thought it was the silliest thing in the world because I didn't really have any willingness. I was just trying to get him to drop the subject about God and leave me alone. So then he said, "Are you willing to take practical actions that I direct to you?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "Can you follow directions?" And I lied and said, "Yes." So he started telling me to do some stuff that didn't make any sense to my problems, any sense to my life. And I just started taking actions I didn't believe in. And here's what I'll share with you real quick, because I only have about one more minute. Faith was the hardest thing for me to get my arms wrapped around in order to be able to stay in Alcoholics Anonymous and grow. And I struggled with it for the first couple years that I was in AA. Even though I was trying to take the steps and do what I was told, I had this real struggle with faith. And I heard this speaker say one time, if you're struggling with faith, imagine this. Imagine somebody that you know comes up to you like Curtis, and Curtis says, "Mike, can I borrow $20 and I will pay you next Tuesday?" Now, if I've never loaned him any money and I have no experience with him paying me back, you would think that if I gave him the $20, it would be based on faith, wouldn't you? But it's not at all. It's based on hope. I hope that Curtis gives me my damn money back. Now, if he shows up Tuesday and he pays me, and this goes on several times down the road, he borrows money and pays me back when he says, and he borrows money and pays me back, eventually I move from hope that he's going to pay me to a belief that he not only can pay me, but he will. And if this goes on long enough, he's going to come to me one day, and he's going to say, "Mike, can I borrow some money?" And I'm going to say, "Listen, Curtis, I'm busy. Go to my house. Here's where I hide my money. Take what you need and pay me when you can. Now get the hell out of here because I got shit to do." Now that's faith, but I couldn't start there. Now that was the greatest story that I'd ever heard in my entire life, and it really saved me because it gave me permission to be here and not believe what you guys told me I had to believe. I just came here and did those actions. I did what I was told to do, and I didn't believe any of it. I just took the actions, and eventually, as I took an action or two, I started to feel a little bit better. I started to get some hope that maybe there was something to this crap you guys were selling. And I kept taking the actions and getting a little more benefit until I started to believe, hey, there's really something to this thing. You guys might be onto something. And eventually I took enough action to have the spiritual experience that everybody talks about, and I knew absolutely that I was going to be okay and never need to drink again. And since then, I've been sober, and I've never had a drink since the time I came in here because of that. So if you're new and you don't feel like you belong here, I understand. Keep coming anyways. If you're struggling with your dual addictions or all the other crap they tell you to leave out of the rooms, it doesn't matter. Keep coming anyways. Eventually, you'll decide for yourself whether you're alcoholic like I did. And if you're lucky as I am, and you decide you are alcoholic and join us, you're in for a great life. Thank you.